gentlemen, welcome back to the Katana Cut. This is episode 4 of my podcast. Who am I? You probably know if you've listened to the other episodes or you're familiar with anything that I do. My name is Adam Ronan, and this is my podcast in which I just talk about a variety of subjects, pop culture, music, movies, books, mental health, all that kind of stuff. Just a nice private moment, 20, 25 minutes between you and I, and my voice in your ears or your eyes as well. Who can say how you're consuming this podcast? And it's good to be back. So been a little while since between episodes 3 and episode 4. Life was crazy. So I went through a big breakup. I've been dealing with a lot of different stuff with the house that I'm in that I inherited from my parents, trying to get that together. You know that I wrote a book, so I've been working on wrapping that up and getting that ready for publication. More on that here in a little while. All kinds of different stuff. But the beautiful thing is oh boy, the amount of peace that I am experiencing in my life is astronomical compared to what it has been in the last couple of years. I am seeing clearly right now. Everything is very good. Music is good. I'm getting a lot of good feedback on stuff. I've got new songs in the works. Of course, the novel that I wrote is done and it is ready for publication and will be out this month. All kinds of shit. So what this means is I'm able to put my eyes back on the prize for a little while. I'm going to be focusing on more consistent content. That means this podcast will be out more consistently, still thinking bi-weekly. So you expect episode 5 sooner than later. I've got a lot of music in the pipeline. I'd like to be more consistent on getting that released as I used to be. Videos, all kinds of stuff. But more importantly, to me at least right now, is the book. Lots of stuff coming for that. That will be out later this month. I've got a new website launching, a new merch store. All kinds of stuff is happening. And I'm very excited about it. This is kind of a sequel episode, so to speak, to the last episode. So the last episode was inspiration and everything. I talked about how I deal with inspiration, where I find inspiration in life, and the different kinds of things that inspire me to do the things that I do. This episode, we're going to talk about how to execute on that inspiration, how I've done so, and most importantly, what's inspired me to be able to culminate all of my talents and ideas and brain power into a novel, from conception to draft 1 to draft 2 to draft 3 to draft 4 to visuals to editing to getting it published for worldwide release here. That has been a very daunting experience, but the inspiration for that has kept me going to make it happen. So we'll talk about those kinds of things. But yeah, I think it's important, and I've read this before, to focus on inspiration. You can find inspiration literally anywhere. Everything, you may not know this, or maybe you do, but you are inspired every day by something. Maybe it's a song you hear, or a picture you see, or a movie you watch, or even someone you know, someone you see. Everybody, everywhere, and everything, all the time, is inspiring you to be different, to pursue something, to, oh shit, maybe I should do that, or that person's doing this, I could do that too. Or you see a song and you're like, that's beautiful, that makes me want to do this, or that makes me feel like I can do this. Or you watch a movie and you're like, I can do that, that makes me want to go do this, blah blah blah. Inspiration is quite literally everywhere, and it is such an amazing thing. But how do we execute on that, and why don't we execute on that more often? That's such an interesting caveat to being a human being. Is your brain is constantly in taking all this information and all this content and beautiful imagery and sounds and soundscapes, and we are constantly lit alive by it, but we don't often capitalize on what it takes to do things with all that fire that builds up inside us. I am grateful that, probably 6 or 7 years ago now, I was able to fine-tune the things that inspired me and turn ideas into action, and made a personal goal to myself to never start something that I can't really finish. And there have been very few projects over the last near decade that haven't come to fruition. Now, whether they succeeded or not is all subjective, but I am proud to be able to say that every time I'm inspired by something, I'll take that inspiration, form it into an idea, and I will always see that idea into a reality. Now, the thing that's taken me the longest to do with that is this book that I wrote. So let me give you a little background on the inspiration that came from that book, how I started it, and how it's led me today to this point where it's almost live and in people's hands for them to read for the first time, which is fucking crazy. So you all know, especially from other podcasts and those of you that know me well, or anyone that's listening to music, everybody knows that horror and the genre of spooky shit is so near and dear to me. I'm inspired by it, and I have been my whole life, starting back from when my parents owned the video store. I was kind of raised by horror films because it's also October, so it's appropriate to talk about this kind of shit because spooky season. But yeah, back in the 80s, I was raised by VHS tapes and videos. My parents owned that video store. So I would just be able to pick and choose and take stuff home and watch it at my leisure. Now, also back then, parenting, I feel like, was a little different. Parents didn't really give two fucks what you did. It was just like, make sure you're all for dinner and make sure you don't fall out of line in school. Otherwise, watch what you want and do what you want. So my parents were very like, you know those monsters aren't real? I'd be like, I know those monsters aren't real. And they'd be like, okay, go for it. Watch it. We don't give a fuck. Which I'm grateful for, because I wouldn't be the man I am today without those moments. So as a young age, horror just captivated me. I was just obsessed with it. It's fucking spooky season. I come alive at this time. Halloween starts on September 1st all the way through October 31st. It's a 2-month affair. We're in October now. I couldn't be more excited. I'm so super stoked. But horror has always been a thing. So, and deep into horror, I was always fascinated by vampires. I think vampires are my favorite genre of monster. Just the sexiness and the allure of immortality and drinking the life force of another being. It's an interesting concept. I've always found it to be so ever since I was a little kid. I was raised on Fright Night, which is to this day hands down my favorite horror movie of all time, followed by Lost Boys, Bram Stoker's Dracula, fucking Bunnicula, shit like that. I would read and consume vampires and vampire mythology at an unhinged rate when I was a young man. And I'm talking young, from like 5 years old to now 41. So there was always the inspiration in me of, God, I would love to do something that has to do with vampires and monsters, stuff like that. When I was young, I really wanted to be an artist. My brother is a fantastic artist, so he always inspired me to also want to draw and be an excellent artist. So I would take time and I would draw my own little comics inspired, so it would always be like a vampire story. And it was always kind of like very Lost Boys-y, all these comics I would make when I was a kid. So it would be like a group of like fucking hip, cool bikers with leather jackets attacking teenagers and shit like that. Very rudimentary, but I tried to make it hyper violent, super cool, awesome fangs, that kind of shit. So the love of vampiric storytelling has always been deep within the core of my existence. So I took that with me and, watched horror movies, blah, blah, blah. And I've always, and then, back in, I want to say like 2006, 2007, at the peak of what I would call my live music career, back when I was playing shows all the time, I was in successful bands, we were touring, doing all kinds of stuff. I always had the notion inside of me, because I've always been a big reader, that, I really want to write a book. I think that would be really cool. Now, this is a long time ago where the balls started rolling around. So in 2007, I started kind of formulating, well, if I wrote a book, what would it be like? Well, it would be, they always say, write about what you know. So what do I know? I know 80s pop culture. I know horror movies. I know just the awesome beats and storytelling notions of the hero's journey, that kind of stuff. So write what you know. So I know those things very well. So I was like, okay, I would like to write a horror story taking place in the 80s, because those are the things that I know the most about. Of course, this was long before everybody on the planet was obsessed with horror in the 80s, and the 80s had made such a big resurgence. But I've had this idea for a long time, and I sat on it for several years. Then I want to say it was 2009. It was at the peak of my musical career, but it was starting to take interesting turns to where I was like, I don't know that this is what I want to continue to do. And those are stories for, of course, another time. But I spent a lot of time in New York, doing stuff with Epic Records and recording this album. And it was just, I don't know, it was just a horrible experience. It was really a life-changing experience that kind of led me away from the music industry for a little while. But that's when the idea of writing came back into my head. I was like, fuck, man, I really want to write this book. I really want to do this. So around the end of 2009, going into 2010, I sat down and I was like, okay, let's do this. I remember I bought a green notebook because I was like, I got to outline it. I can't just start writing willy-nilly. So I bought a green notebook and I just started fleshing out ideas of this story that I wanted to write. And those ideas that I fleshed out in that same notebook are pretty prevalent in the novel that is coming out this month. So I started the first draft of the novel called Scrolls of the Undead. And, well, actually, it wasn't titled that in the first draft. The first draft was titled The Misadventures of Adam and Nad. So the characters that are in the book are inspired by and written based on myself and everybody that I was friends with and grew up with in the 80s. So the main character, his name is Adam Jones. That is inspired and written after myself. And his best friend, Nad McKenzie, that is inspired by my best friend, Gordy, who most of you know about Gordy, or if you've been with me for a long time, you love Gordy. And if you haven't been with me for a long time, you don't yet know Gordy, but you will one day. So that was what the original draft was called, The Misadventures of Adam and Nad. And I started kind of fleshing things out. And I wrote, I had an outline with all the character bios, their motivations, everything they want to do. Then I would, chapter 1, this is what I want to occur. The 3 different beats for, the beginning, middle, and end of each act. And I would flesh that out over the series of like 50 pages, character bios, ideas, chapters, stuff like that. And then I started writing the first draft. I finished the first draft of the novel in 2010. And then I took that draft and I began writing it, or reading it and just going through with a red pen and just like, oh, I should change that, blah, 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 blah. And I wrote a second draft and it was cool. It was really cool. And did the same thing, red pen, go over it, kind of get everything changed up and, alter this, that, check for grammar, stuff like that, and rewrite, go back to the drawing board. Keep in mind, I didn't take these drafts and go and then just edit the drafts. I would rewrite the entire draft from scratch for some fucking reason. I would go through it and I would get it printed out and bind it at this local printing company in Denver. And then I would go through it with a red marker, make all these changes, and I would rewrite it again. So 2 drafts of a novel written from the ground up in the span of a year. And then I kind of started to mold and take its shape. So it changed. I changed the name to Scrolls of the Undead. Because I was like, I want to make this into a series. So I changed the name, The Misadventures of Adam and Nad, just fucking stupid. So I wrote a third draft, and during this time, I had left the band and I had left the girl that I was living with in the time in Denver, and I had moved back home. I moved back home with my parents because I had kind of hit rock bottom in terms of my trajectory of my life. I didn't know what I was doing anymore. And so I worked on this third draft for quite a while. And actually, if you're watching this, I can show this to you. This was the third draft of the novel that was completed on January 27th, 2012. So this was draft 3. The name was Scrolls of the Undead, The Rise of the Samhain. And this was bind and printed. This was the manuscript, and I was like, okay, the story's really starting to take shape. Now it's time to sit with it and go through it with my red pen again and make all the necessary edits for a 4th and final draft. And then, for whatever reason, I set the book in a drawer, and 10 years went by. I worked on this thing so hard for 2 years, and then I did nothing with it. I didn't even fuck with the edits. I just stuffed it in a drawer. I guess the universe was telling me that maybe it wasn't the right time. I can't really explain to you why I decided not to do anything with it at that time. Then I started, then life did all kinds of things. I started working on solo music. I started a YouTube channel with Gordy and other buddies to do gaming stuff. We did that for 5 years. And life just kind of kept going and going and going. And then I started the Adam Ronan, and then the Adam Ronan Music Initiative started during that, all that, and then making music and doing all that. And music has, of course, never left me. I will always have the inspiration for music. But, just all this culminated, and finally, just 10 years had gone by. You're like, whoa, what the fuck? And then I always talk about, I wrote a book. I've got several people that I've known in my life that have worked on books and self-published and stuff like that. I'm like, fuck, I got a book too. Like, I should do something with it. And everyone's like, yeah, you should. It's cool. Only two people ever read this draft. My mom read this draft, and of course she was like, it's great, because moms. And my ex-girlfriend, Olivia, she read the draft, and she was like, it's awesome. You got to do something with it. And I'm sure she was being generous, because going back through it, it wasn't awesome, but that's okay. I digress. Fast forward to January of 2022. I started thinking, okay, it's time to do something with this book. So I dug this out, and exactly 10 years later, on January 27th of 2022, I started the 4th draft. I went through and reread and made these notes. I re-outlined. I created some different stuff. I changed the trajectory of the backstories, added in some different fantasy elements to just make it more unique. And I rewrote the book completely. But this time, instead of rewriting it as a 4th draft, I essentially rewrote the entire book from beginning to end, changing story beats, adding characters, changing character motivations, adding different backstories, adding a whole lot more world building and lore to create this universe that I have created. And of course, it is no longer called this. It is still Scrolls of the Undead, but the subtitle for the final draft and version that's coming out is The Last Light. And you'll find out. There'll be tons of content here coming, explaining everything. But that's I did literally the final bit of it was just completed just a little bit ago. So that is now like 11 years that I've been sitting on this book. But essentially, since I started it in 2010, I guess it's 13 years that this book has been digesting inside of me and just coming out ever so slowly. But the inspiration for that never left me. It was always there, and I am so excited for this. So the book is coming out on October 28th. It's going to be kind of a slow rollout, so I think at the start, you'll be able to purchase it from a couple of online retailers, including myself, on my website. I'll have specific editions, regular edition, and I'll have limited edition, autographed editions that I will be selling as well. And then once it's approved by the world, essentially, of all the publishers and stuff, it will be available globally at every retailer possible. We're talking ebooks, stuff like that, retailers, Barnes & Noble, all kinds of shit. It's really crazy. I'm very excited about it. And I think that part of me just like back then knew that it needed more time in the oven and it wasn't the right time to do a book. But now that everything in the world has changed and anything is possible for anybody at any time with the correct amount of work and just pushing forward, making things happen, anybody can do anything. So now I was like, now is the time to publish a book, because it's not abnormal for me to create something from the ground up, write it, edit it, and fucking produce it, do all the visuals for it, and put it into publication by myself, because I am a DIY motherfucker, and everything I do in-house, including like music and stuff. I will, music, I write, record, perform, produce, mix, master, and distribute, and do all the cover art, everything all by myself. And so very similar deal with this. And I am just so excited. So inspiration can really change your life if you know how to harness it. And the execution is just as important as where you find the inspiration. This is going to be a little bit of a shorter episode. I like keeping the episodes around 20 minutes. I think the bite-sized type podcasts are better than the long, drawn-out things that you get in a more conversational situation with other people. I would like to bring on guests, though, and be able to have that for future episodes. So, but I'll end this by just talking about what does the remainder of 2023 bring for me and content. Well, I've got a book coming out this month. I also have a song that will be another single that will be launching alongside it to just kind of help promote it and, so you have like an audio experience to go along with the book. I am working on the audio book. That unfortunately turned out to be a much larger project than I anticipated. So it's not going to launch at the same time as the print book, but it will be probably early 2024 or late 2023 in the next month or so, maybe the next couple months before the audio version is live. It's got a whole production. Not only is it just the narration, but it's narration and voice acting. There's musical scores behind it, sound effects, all kinds of shit. So it's a whole audio experience. That'll be coming out too. More songs. I'm going to try to be releasing at least a single a month for the foreseeable future. Albums have kind of seemed to go by the wayside in terms of the industry, and singles are really where it's at. So I'm going to be putting a lot of effort into just releasing singles here and there and seeing what I can do with that. Like to get back to working on some music videos. But yeah, you're going to see a lot more consistent content going out through the rest of the year into next year. And really, honestly, I'm just going to hammer this fucking book into the buttholes of every person on this planet. And it's going to be really good. I'm really excited. It's the best thing I've ever fucking done. And the music that's coming out is the best music I've ever done. And I'm fucking jazzed about life right now. And that's cool as fuck because it's been a really shitty couple of years. But I found inspiration in memories with my mother. I found inspiration in the breakup I went through. I found inspiration in everything that I'm doing. And I'm turning that inspiration into action and into something beautiful to achieve my own personal peace. And you can do those same things. Anyway, this was episode 4 of the Katana Cut. Just me and you having discussions and fucking telling you about cool shit. I love you all. Thank you so much for listening to this or watching. If you watch the video version, which is on YouTube, you can look me up on YouTube just under Adam Ronan. Or this podcast is available on Spotify and various other networks and stuff. Whatever floats your boat. And, thank you very much. And I'll see you guys in a couple weeks for episode 5. We gotta figure out what the topic is, but we'll get there. Love you.